I'm here at the Slamdance Film Festival 2019, the 25th anniversary of the Slamdance Film Festival, and these are the live-action filmmakers from the episodes block. Why don't we go down the line and have you each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the project that you have here at Slamdance.
Hi, my name is Woody Fu. My project here is called Asian American Studies. It's a series of sketches and shorts that I made. Starting off with a bang.
Hi, my name is Traven Rice, and I'm the writer, director, and creator of Division Street. It's a digital series about a little girl who moves to the Lower East Side neighborhood in New York City to live with her cranky Jewish grandmother, and then quickly learns that the neighborhood is magical.
My name is Marilyn Chambers. I am the writer, director, producer of Tijuana, which is set in 1920s Mexico during U.S. Prohibition. It is about tequila smuggling, and it focuses on Carmen, who is a devilishly calculating, intelligent woman who manipulates her husband, who is the chief of police, into helping her launch her tequila smuggling empire. And it's a pilot, and we're hoping to turn it into a television series.
Nice. My name is Brian Bonds, and I'm with Bobo Touch. We're screening the second episode of our narrative comedy series, Bobo Touch Helpline, which is about two dads that run a community hotline to help out random crazy calls all around the city. And we rent a garage in a little desk in a garage, dingy garage in Sunset Park. And it's set in a very sort of hyper version mythical world of New York. And in this episode, we focus on a local hero in North Brooklyn called Bushwick Tarzan, who then falls under the influence of an evil doctor who gives him some acid, and we save the day.
As you do when you're on acid. I'm Camille Hollett-French, and my film is number 3 in the Absence of Angels. Right there. Yeah, of course. I think it's like, there we go. From the series Her Story in 3 Parts. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. That's where I'm from right now. And it's a short film series, an anthology series about sex, sexuality, and assault and how it intersects with shame and how we live through that. This particular episode is about a woman, Crystal, who's raped in broad daylight, and her emotional terrain in the aftermath of that and going through that. So we shot it across Canada in less than a year in our 3 film centers, Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. And now I'm broke.
We're all broke.
Very, very broke.
Well, that's a good segue, because I think that that's a common thread that is both present in feature independent filmmaking as well as what you guys are doing in a serialized and episodic context. I would say when I first started coming out here to Park City, there wasn't the episodic storytelling component. This is something that's relatively new, and I think that's largely because of both the internet, digital series and platforms and distribution, as well as more readily available kinds of production technologies and things. But what specifically drew each of you to the serialized format versus creating something that was a single standalone story not to be experienced episodically?
Well, in my case, my project is a series of shorts. So they're basically sketches, and I was drawn to it because they are all premise or idea driven. So each one explores like a different idea about being Asian American in the States. And so I use this format because I can really like focus in laser sharp on a topic or an idea that I'm exploring and like hit it really hard for like 2 or 3 minutes and then get out. So for me, this was like an ideal format because I got to explore like 3 different ideas in a very targeted way.
Yeah, I had a couple reasons for wanting to do it. I mean, initially, obviously, it's something that I could do myself that was manageable, one of the episodes, but I specifically had an idea for them to be vignettes that could stand on their own. And so there is a through line, but I really thought, they can just be a few minutes. And it is very much a love letter to the neighborhood. So it's more about the little girl's encounters that she has out in the neighborhood with people and characters, and the magic element comes in each one. So they're all kind of different that way. And I thought they could just be little vignettes.
So we chose creating a pilot to be developed into a television episodic series because we're exploring what we're showing today is a pilot, a sample of the larger piece. But our aspiration is to travel through the decades. So we start in the 20s, and which examines why Tijuana exists today. And for those that don't know, Tijuana was formed in response to Prohibition in the United States. And it became this really glamorous, luxurious place that attracted mobsters and movie stars and dignitaries and misfits to go down there to have these decadent sort of balls and go horse racing. So the elite, not only in the United States but all over the world, would descend in Tijuana during 1920 and 1933. When Prohibition ended, then what happened in Mexico is they made gambling illegal. So that was the beginning of the decline of Tijuana into what we know it today, but set the tone of it being a party town. And then the visionaries of Tijuana moved to Nevada and created Las Vegas. So for us to sort of tell this whole story, it really is very ambitious and very grand, and we want to start in the 20s and really get deep into the backstory of why Tijuana was formed, how it was economically an incredible economic opportunity for the Mexican people. Our story is 100% lensed through the Mexican experience, so it's not pressed through the American experience. It's in Spanish. And we want to travel right up until after World War II. So we sort of consider it like Peaky Blinders meets Downton Abbey in Tijuana on tequila.
Yeah, I think for Bobo Touch, since we're set in the hyper reality area of like our imaginations run wild, we're kind of able to think about 3-4 episodes from now, what's next. We could have this sort of monster or this kind of character, or let's take a dark turn, or let's make a dig at this. And it can, I think the exciting part for us is that it can evolve to whatever we want it to be, as opposed to with a feature, there's a lot more of there's always an arc and story and everything that you have to do to plan for both, but there's it just ends. And I think with this installments, it's great. You can create different volumes, seasons, and there's a lot of room to be playful in that space.
Funnily enough, the 3 parts in her story, in 3 parts, they all started as their own. And then as I was developing them, which has happened by chasing grants, another script and then another script, another draft rather. Eventually they started to sort of form around each other, and they do have, like you were saying, that one common vein, but also could be standalone. And that's actually how we've put them out into the festivals as standalone shorts mostly. And so it was a bit of a vessel as well. I'm an actor, a writer by trade originally. I think I was a writer first. And I got to a point where I was working so hard in Canada and nobody's paying attention to me. So I said, okay, well then I'm going to take over Canada. And so I said, we're going to shoot them in 3 different cities. And by making it a series, it felt like every single time one would succeed, then the whole thing could succeed. And so even though they're different stories, that little quiet common vein of shame related to sex is what came out of that.
So that also chasing grants and sort of putting this together piecemeal leads me to my next question, which is the ambition of creating something that's episodic. Some of you have created pilots. Some of you have created series that are relatively finished right now, but have the possibility to evolve into other things. What kind of considerations did you have in mind as filmmakers when you were biting off 4 or 5 different episodes instead of a single short or a feature, and just putting it all together financially? Like it seems very ambitious to make an episodic show at the independent level.
Yeah, I mean, the shorts that I made are all self-produced, and because they're all exploring, they're only thematically related. You know what I mean? They're all about the Asian American experience, but individually, they're all they tackle different subjects. So for each one of them, each one of the 3 presented its own logistical problems that I had to like fill in, but also by the same token, like some of them, like one of them just takes place in a bedroom and is like one location, and it's very simple to film. But other ones I needed like 8 locations, and I would need to like each project, each specific episode required a completely new set of parameters to film around. And so one was in studio, one was on location, one was like multiple locations. But in my case, it was all just like, it just made it like, how do you pare away the unnecessary things to just hit the core idea of what this episode is about? So in that sense, for me, it was very helpful, because it was like, all right, well, half this stuff is not necessary. Half these ideas don't really push what I actually want to say in this. So it allows me to take out, to keep only what is absolutely necessary.
Oh, I should clarify. We've only shot the pilot. And so I've written 10 episodes. And so we're pitching those actively for the first season. And they're all short little bites. But I did the first one knowing I could manage that. But because of the magical realism element, it needs some funding for me to feel like proud of it, that, this gonna make it work. I mean, I did it in the Lower East Side where I live, and I've been reporting on that area. So I have a lot of access to it that I wouldn't have normally had. But yes, we're actively pitching the series.
For us, our project was incredibly ambitious because it's a period piece. So for those who have created a period piece, it automatically costs 25% to 30% more than present day, because even men have to go through hair and makeup, and there's costumes. And so we ended up having, and time is a concern, and obviously women have to go through hair and makeup. So it's very expensive. And we raised the money to shoot it through a Seed and Spark crowdfunder, combined with friends and family giving money. So we raised $30,000 to create it, which can sound like a lot of money to some people, but it's really not for what we were undertaking. But I have a core group of creatives that I work with all the time, and so I called in a lot of favors, and that helped with all of those aspects, I think. But it's really challenging to create a period piece on that little money. Combined with, we got the location, at a really affordable rate because it was on an all-girls high school, and we did a trade partnership with them. So, because we had a lot of women and minorities in leadership roles, so we did a trade where the young teens could connect with a cinematographer, director, producer, and we partnered with the college, with the high school, and that enabled us to get the location, which sold the period. So I'm trailing off a little bit from the question, and I'm sorry, I don't think the question really galvanized in my brain, but what we felt was really important in order for us to sell this to a streaming outlet or a production company that wants to help us take it to television, is we needed to create the world for them to see it, to believe it. And I've learned from so many other independent filmmakers that that's the way to do it. So that's always been our ambition, to do that. And I really required all my crew to deliver. Our main goal was to deliver on the period. If we didn't sell that, we failed. So everyone exceeded my expectations and did it on, I actually don't know how we pulled it off, to be quite honest. But anyways, we had to do it well with what we had in order for us to succeed with the end game, which is to get it to series.
For us, we've produced these episodes ourselves. We both have kids and full-time jobs, so we sneak out late at night or do them on the weekends with a small crew that we have brought on since episode 1. And if we, vibe well with them, and we're sticking with you forever. And we also call in a lot of favors. We have a good relationship with our local councilman in Brooklyn, who's helped provide some locations for us through his connections, or we develop, connections. The gas station that is our office, we've, developed a relationship and give him a small fee. And, it's been awesome to have the support from our friends and family to give feedback and just kind of see what's working. And when they're out, sometimes we're able to, before producing a next episode and getting into production, we'll do a documentary or a music video for a friend. So we're not always in the thick of that world. so we're kind of keeping things interesting. But it's been fun to, have this be 8 minutes, but we'd love to develop it into a larger sort of, 20 to 30 minute Broad City meets Ghostbusters idea, in time. But so it's been working so far, and we're sticking with that process for now.
Money and series / episodes. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. I'm a first-time director, producer, and I wrote it and acted in it and directed it and produced it, and I had like the hardest year of my life, but hopefully the most satisfying. But there are many tips, indie filmmakers. Get your mom to do craft, for instance. It was a really tough thing. I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm nuts, but I suppose we're all nuts in some way. When we were planning it and going, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? One day I was by myself in our condo, and we were subletting a condo at the time, but we actually lived in a bus for 2 years to make these films. And I was standing there and I was writing notes on this board that we had, and I kid you not, like clear as somebody standing behind me, I heard a voice that said, just keep moving forward, I'll take care of the money. When I was in Toronto, before we'd moved to Vancouver, where we shot the last one, I hadn't worked as an actor in 3 years. I moved to Vancouver. I had already kind of started doing this. And in 1 year, I've been on 5 network TV shows, done 2 commercials, and done like every single time somebody else had to be paid, I'd book a job. And so it was just this like miracle that I'm so grateful for. And we would just keep trying. We didn't make this huge plan in the beginning because I was very much in a position where I didn't know what I didn't know. But I still went and jumped in. And so we just, it was just like flying by the seat of our pants the whole time. And but now that I've done this and how much money we've spent, we probably could have spent less because we've made mistakes that we've now learned from. So I'm excited going forward to have a really skilled line producer in place and also to really make that plan. I'm a big advocate of having a vision and making a plan to make it happen, but I didn't even know how to make that plan at the time. So that's what I'm going to be doing moving forward. We did get a bit of funding from this program called YAS Shorts through ACTRA Toronto, and that's our actors union. YAS, the Young Emerging Actors Assembly for people who play between 16 and 35 on screen, and they have a shorts film program. So I was a resident of that, and we got our equipment all paid for number 2, Hush Little Baby. And then everything else was self-funded. Like we sold our condo in Toronto, and we it's been a whirlwind, and sometimes it's still really scary when I think about it. But then I go, oh, we got into fucking Slamdance, so I don't care. And actually, something that is still a huge surprise for me, and I still have to pinch myself. Number 2, Hush Little Baby, got into a festival in London, the Discover Film Awards, and we won the world's largest cash prize for a short film. So we won £20,000, which is all gone already because it went on our bank loans. But yeah, like sometimes, you got to have that plan. Sometimes the plan doesn't work, and sometimes you just got to go and hope for the best. But I'm not going to be doing that every single time because I've learned now. So, yeah.
So in your series, the episode that you're showing here at Slamdance, there is, well, the crux of the episode, revolves around an incredibly brutal act of sexual violence. And, as an audience member watching that, it made me very uncomfortable. As a director, it made me even more uncomfortable because, I'm looking at that and I'm like, how can you get something like that with maintaining, a level of emotional safety on set, and it just came off so incredibly well. I would love to hear, about your experience, creating that episode from that perspective.
Right. Thank you. My PM and one of my producers for this episode, when she read the script, she went, how the fuck are we going to cast this? And I was like, oh, no, Robin, it's me. And she was like, oh, thank God. And so that was something that disconnect was already a non-issue because it was connected. I had written it and I knew I was going to do it. So I didn't have to convince anybody or make anyone feel safe because I was able to create my own safety. In terms of Krista Corsi Ireland, who plays one of the pivotal characters in it, it was important for him and I to really be connected because of the intimacy in that moment. And but what's funny is he's since become a really good friend. And so, like, he was just such a support for me in that way. I was able to surround myself with people who could support me in the moment. And that's what we did right from the beginning, especially being a first-time director. My goal was to find people who I deemed to be better than I am so that I could be the only new person, so I could just fit myself into that machine as it, tried to function. And so there was a lot of, I was able to separate. And acting and directing and producing, you have to just like switch those hats in a moment. And the best way to do it is to consciously, and like, a lot of us here know that, is to consciously go, okay, actor hat, okay, director hat. So by the end of the 4-day shoot, I was exhausted, of course, because my brain was just, it was exhilarating, but I was exhausted because I had to switch and switch. And it would even sometimes, as a producer, be like, you're in a scene, you're in the moment, and then they call, or, I call cut, or I end the scene. And then you'd be like, by the way, can somebody move that garbage can? Somebody's going to trip on that. So it's this constant thing. And basically going in, I told myself, I would have a lot of conversations with myself, basically, going in and afterwards, so I could check in with myself, how I could learn better for next time. And going in, I just went, you know what? You've got all these people around you. You have all of this money that's at stake. So there is no option to fail. You just have to do it, right? And in those specific moments, actually, one of the scenes that I'm sure you're talking about, we only shot maybe 4 of those, and we shot them in a very short time. But the day got pushed really late because makeup and whatever, and setting up the shot. We shot 4 of them, and then we ended up using the first take in the end anyway. And our actors, it's about relationship. So it's really important for me to meet with my actors beforehand, to meet with my crew, to make sure that we had this. So it wasn't just a bunch of people showing up to set and being like, where do you want this light to go? Like, it was just really important to create that. Also, Abanoub Andreas, who is wonderful, who plays Ricky, he's in Tallahassee, Florida right now, repping the film because we have a double world premiere today. It's like silence for months and then 2 festivals in the same day. But he's a really good friend of mine, and I wrote that for him, and he's been with me in that whole journey, and he's a director as well, an actor, and from the moment we met, we were very close, and so I had his support as well, and he was in a lot of those intimate scenes, which did make him feel uncomfortable, and we talked about that. So it's just a lot of communication and just making sure that we were all there for each other. But I will say, once, all the lights went off and the cameras were packed and everybody went home. So we shot this one in Montreal, and I really wanted to use Montreal as a character in the backdrop and have a lot of those elements in there. We were at an Airbnb, and all of our crew that I had brought from, some of the crew that I brought from Toronto, everybody had left. And I was sitting there by myself in this empty 2-bedroom Airbnb on the bed, and I swear, for like 12 hours the next day, I was just sitting there going, what have I done? What have I done? Because I was also such an open vessel the whole weekend. I was, naked for a lot of it in some way, and cameras like in places that I've never even seen. And so I just went, oh my God, am I mad? Or like, it was just a really vulnerable place. And knowing that once I was in that, I had to also accept that it's okay to be in that vulnerable place, to breathe through it, to live through it. And all of us feel this, right? Every film that we make and everything it's an extension of us. So we have to be okay with living through those emotions and going, okay, now I'm a different person having done this. Now what am I going to make next as a new person? So I talk a lot. I think that answered your question. Great. Oh, there you go.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no worries. So I want to talk a little bit about Brooklyn because despite having this wide array of crazy characters in your hyper-real, version of New York City, I feel like the biggest character that looms over the whole thing is just Brooklyn in general. And, we've got this connection because I used to live in Bay Ridge. I used to live in Park Slope. My family's all from Brooklyn. And as hyper-real and strange as your episode is, there's something so genuine about, yeah, I used to see people who were just that nuts, like on the street corner and at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd be like, what is that dude's story? So for you, coming up with this material and weaving this story together and having Brooklyn sort of be the underpin of that, how did that evolve with you and your filmmaking partners?
So that's funny. You lived at Bay Ridge. That's where I live and went to high school. And yeah, we wanted to capture the expansion of gentrification that's kind of happening in a lot of New York, but into South Brooklyn, where people would say, I would never like live there. That's a long commute to get into the city. The R train sucks. And now it's okay. They're like moving, and there's a lot of cool. Finally, there's some good beer on tap and cool things happening. We don't have to travel as far to go to go see cool shows. And so ultimately, we wanted to showcase that happening and the idea of the co-working space booming also in Brooklyn and having a desk within this, shitty garage, and basically also touch on other parts of the neighborhood, having someone like Bushwick Tarzan, who's this health guru, but he's in a Speedo walking around with white high tops, and he's ripped. And there are people like that. You're like, wow, that person's really fit, and are they crazy? You never know. And it's tough. You can't really, it's good not to judge people, but in New York, you don't know what's going on the train. And we love featuring that sort of weird dark side, even the everyday experience that living there. It's like a movie within itself. So we're happy to really play into that, and we don't care if we keep filming underground and overusing things. I think it's always classic and fun to and we're lucky to have the city be a resource as a backdrop.
That was great. So in your film, it actually starts out with sort of a little message about seeing the production through the eyes of the people who lived in Tijuana and their native language. Why was that such an important choice for you?
Because they speak Spanish there.
Okay, that was very brief. A little bit more. All right,
great. Well, to me, I was raised on foreign films and British dramas and Australian, New Zealand dramas, and I generally don't fall into a lot of the American. I do watch a lot of American content, but there's a lot of it that I don't connect with, right? And so I collaborated with a community of Mexican artists on this project. They have really embraced me and welcomed me into this space. And when they first, pitched the project to me, I was really, adamant about them finding a Mexican director to do this. But I'd worked with these people before, and they knew that I will succeed in getting the quality that they wanted and the way that I tell story and the sort of big picture. So they didn't take no for an answer. It's really the long answer to that. So for me, I want to create content that I want to see, and so I want to see others' perspectives. And we always wanted to see this through the Mexican gaze. We want to explore this relationship of why Tijuana exists and this relationship between Tijuana and the United States, but telling it from their perspective over the decades. There's just unimaginable things that happened, good things, bad things. One example, Mexico put immense pressure, the United States put immense pressure on Mexico to put Japanese people in internment camps. They refused at first, and then they conceded under the immense pressure. A lot of people don't know something simple like that, or something so painful. And then, so we want to embroider that into the larger story. So I feel like if you are a director going into a community that is not your own, you have to hold it in high regard, and you have to really love that community and really respect that community. And I think you disrespect a community if you force everyone to speak English, or just to satisfy an English-speaking market. We also want this to. We also feel confident that this is going to appeal to a Spanish language market as well as an English-speaking market. So I think it's a mixture of all of those things. Right time, right place. I think the atmosphere to hear this perspective from the Mexican people is now.
That was an excellent answer. Thank you very much. So in your episode, the crux of the conflict that's sort of presented is a multi-generational, multiracial, sort of blended family disconnect between a grandmother and a granddaughter. Can you tell me a little bit about, how that came to be? Is that something personal to you?
There are some elements that are personal to me. But I absolutely wanted to peel back those layers around cultural identity and mixed race and cultural collisions that you find in the Lower East Side. So, I mean, we've been sort of embedded in the Lower East Side, writing about the neighborhood and reporting on it. We have a local news site. So I feel like we've met and really gotten to know a whole bunch of different communities within the neighborhood, and historically have just been really fascinated about those culture clashes. So there's that story, and then I wanted to talk about how uncomfortable that can be, but also the strength that it brings, the multi cultural diversity. And then the other piece of that, which for me was the personal part, is sort of this unconventional family, or growing up with something that's not the traditional family, and how that can be a wonderful thing, that the community can come together and support somebody. Because I went through something similar to that. So, yeah, it was a little personal.
And Woody, my biggest question was, do you really use Siri to search Pornhub? Like, is that a thing that you personally do? No. It's
Is that weird? Is that a weird thing?
It's a very your episodes are very, very funny. Your skits are absolutely hilarious, and obviously there is a strong through line about Asian and Asian American identity, and what that experience is like in the larger sort of American tableau. So it feels a little bit like a Chappelle show, kind of a thing for people who are culturally Asian American. I love that. Tell me a little bit about where that comedy directly came from for finding your collaborators and getting this going.
Sure. Thank you. A lot of it came from, I was doing a stage show. I was doing a one-man show called Asian Gracefully. We get puns. But a lot of the sketches that came from that, I was like, well, some of these can be made into shorts. So I basically took the ones that I felt could exist best in video format / kind of had something to say, so it wasn't just like, here's like a frivolous thing for like 90 seconds, it's over. And over time it came, so the first one, the Pornhub one, is directly lifted from the show. And that was just a workaround so as to not make the audience look at pornographic images. And the second one was also from the show. The racism song is also from the show. And then the third one, the representation one, was written specifically for video, because I was like, I wouldn't be able to make this otherwise. But they all came from me originally staging a show that was like about my family, about growing up Asian American, about, it was, typical one-man show fare. But in that, I hit a lot of topics that, again, through making three pieces, I kind of saw the through line in a macro way that I wasn't able to see when I was making it, when I was inside of making it.
That was great. Well, I want to thank all of the episodic live-action filmmakers from the Slamdance 2019 episodes block. Thank you guys for coming down and talking with us. This is the 25th anniversary of the Slamdance Film Festival, and congratulations on everything that you've created and your premieres here at Slamdance. Welcome to the Slamdance Film Festival episodic roundtable. I'm here with the animated filmmakers of the episodic block. I want to kind of go down the line and just have you introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about your project.
All right. I am Patricia Beckman-Wells. My project is Propolis Part 7. It is about the environmental apocalypse, but done in cartoon form. It is told through the dysfunctional family of 4, and the characters all represent an element. The mom is an alcoholic, but she represents fire. The father is a drug addict who represents water. The son is PTSD from being just abused by the parents, and he represents wind. And the daughter is just trying to rebuild her world, representing earth.
Hi, I'm Rob Kleinschmidt. My film is The Rocky Roads. It's a stop-motion animated film. It's about a teacher named Mr. K who's trying to get through his lesson plans, but every time he tries to teach, the kids either shit themselves or projectile vomit, and then things go a little bit off. I teach in New York City, and it's sort of my panic attack on really bad days. I have a really weird job. I teach 3rd and 4th graders filmmaking. So my crew, my DPs, my boom operators are all 8-year-olds. And some days I go home and I'm like, man, I'm the greatest teacher. How do we pull this off? And then there's certain days, where kids are crying or my boom mic operator is dusting the ceiling. And it's just, that makes me anxious. So it's like a film about my anxiety on really bad days.
What drew you guys to the episodic style of filmmaking? It's so much more ambitious, especially in an animated medium, than thinking of a singular project like a short or a feature, and knowing that there's an end to it. What attracts you to that open-endedness, or just the scale of doing something that's a series-long piece of work?
It's great because you don't have to think of a new idea. I like episodic because actually I want to do an entire animated film. So I'm going to do it a chunk at a time, and I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to keep up my energy by putting it out. Each episode, by some miracle, has an arc. So works. I'm going to chunk out those arcs and put them out there. And what's really fun about doing episodic and not having to do it with a studio is that I can sometimes go deeper into a character. Maybe I can riff off some bizarre idea I get about another character and spend a few minutes on it. And I really enjoy maybe not sticking with the script and maybe inserting something.
When I was a kid, my favorite show from the 70s, which hardly anyone remembers, was the Banana Splits, which is kind of, people know from the Tra-La-La song. And I loved about it was, for anyone who doesn't know, they dressed up as monkeys. It was human beings, and they had a rock band. But they could do whatever they wanted. Every show, they can go somewhere else. So for my series, it starts out in the classroom. But then when they go on a weekend, my second one takes place in the Wild West. It's called A Stomach Full of Western Juice. And then they go to space, and then they go back to school. So I love the idea that I can do whatever I want. I don't have to sort of have a beginning, middle, and end. I can wake up one night and say, hey, you know what, I want to do this next time with the Rocky Roads. That's why I like the episodes.
So what drew you to the animated medium? And both of you, are a little bit different. We have a stop motion animator, we have a digital animator. But how long have you been doing it, and what was kind of your first inspiration into animated feature work?
You get to go first.
Oh, thank you. I've been doing stop motion animation since I was about 15, 16 years old. I started out doing fictional filmmaking, and I realized a lot of my buddies that were supposed to show up didn't show up, and it became frustrating all that time, and it just hit me. I loved Davy and Goliath as a child. It was one of my favorite shows, and Gumby, all those great. And I was like, you know what? I can build my own world in a corner of the basement. I can work on it 24 hours a day, and I don't have to depend on anybody but myself. So I like that sort of power that it's depending on me. I don't have to rely on anybody else.
Same way. Yeah. I like the control. I do all of it. You do all of it too, right? You do. Sorry, I didn't mean to touch your knee. Whatever gets a story done, you do as quickly as you can in the medium. My fastest medium is 2D because I use photos and I reproduce elements in the background, and that's fast. And then if I draw something, I can get what I need done for the flash of times it needs to be there and be out of it. I'd love to do more stop motion, but then I'd have a lot of stuff I'd have to take care of. So I do 2D because it's all neatly kept in a computer and easier to control.
Well, I think something that you both kind of touched on here is that there is the ability for you to create in a vacuum. And of course, you do have collaborators, and there are always going to be, people who are involved in the project. But animation allows you that freedom to be able to, almost like an author, go off somewhere for 6 months or however long and create the art without having to have those sort of dependencies. But at the same time, that feels like it raises other hidden issues. So why don't you tell me a little bit about some of the pain points for you?
Sure.
Well, I also want to say quickly, hey Tracy, my wife helps me make the models, so we're a two-person crew. The sort of pitfalls about it is a lot of times you don't have other collaborators, so you're sort of unsure where you're going with your work. I have a couple friends I show once in a while, but with animation it's hard because you have to kind of have it put together before you can kind of get opinions. So when you're actually doing the process, And I've made films before that take me over a year. And how do you show sort of broken up stills? You have to wait all the way till the end. And once in a while, the end result, I mean, I made films that I thought were great and friends, and then realizing, yeah, that really wasn't good. So sort of you really kind of have to work a long time and have that end result before you really know what you have.
Touched on the same thing. I sit in a studio for as many hours as I can cram in, and at the end of the day, it's just me making it. So showing it to somebody is really scary because you have to wait a few weeks, and then you just wonder, oh, did they understand the story? Did I make it obvious enough? And you get that insecurities. Good thing is that you don't have to collaborate with anybody. You know, you don't have to be political about their bad ideas, but also then you don't get their good ideas. I think the worst thing that I experienced putting my film together was environment. I was in 116 degrees in the summertime, in a barn, sitting by myself, pushing through it. That's the hardest part, and you're probably under the hot lights, so physically it can be very demanding.
So you talked a little bit about those environmental conditions and the hardship of it, but at the same time, you're sort of slaving away in this. Was it a garage or a barn, or you're just out there and you're thinking in your head like, I'm building a universe from scratch. As an animator, like I have this vision of an entire world that is coming from inside my head and just going out, to the audience. What does that feel like as a creator?
That is awesome. I love, I'm getting looser and looser, because when you start animation, you think, oh, it's got to look like one of the big movies, and people are really tight. They think it all has to look professional. And I worked at the larger studios, and they were very perfect. But now I'm getting into the hallucinogenic stuff. I'm like making things not look perfect, and like just getting into the raw. What's the emotion? The emotion is like, oh, that's fun, because you're just sort of, now you're just being creative, and it's something that you get to, you just vomit creativity, and at the end of the day, you can really be proud of it, because if it's got some real emotion in it, it's usually when you've done it really fast. I mean, when you look at the Impressionists versus, like my dad, he was an artist. He started out pretty tight, and he, made the kind of paintings he thought other people wanted to see. But later on in his life, and with some macular degeneration, he got a little looser, and then he just said, the heck with it. And wow, the stuff had emotion. So that's where I'm going. And you touched on exactly what I love, is like, okay, if you're going to go with it, go with it. Get the other Red Bull. Get that extra chocolate bar. Get a little more lucid and just, be loose.
Yeah, I echo everything Pat said. I shot the Rocky Roads. The budget was $35 in my kitchen table in my tenement apartment in Brooklyn. And it's not perfect. If you slow down frames, you could see tubes coming out. Try to cover them up as best as I can in Photoshop and do all that. But yeah, just animation's great because, especially I love stop motion, because even if it's sloppy, there's something magical about just the process. Today with CGI, and you look back, and even I teach young children, I show them Ray Harryhausen clips and mesmerize, and just sit there and like amazed that that is an actual creation.
It's magical when there's mistakes in it, right?
For sure, and you can see sometimes fingerprints or things that are a little bit off. Yeah, sort of that DIY aspect of it I love.
And that's missing. And you touched on the stuff from the 70s. That's where I want to go back. I want to go back where the animation was that kind of lucid stuff.
Right.
Whereas now it feels so aseptic or antiseptic.
Well, I think that you guys have just encapsulated part of like the whole Slamdance message about, go out there, make your film, do it DIY, stick to your vision. And, the work is just absolutely incredible. And I want to thank our animated episodic filmmakers. This is the Slamdance Film Festival 2019, 25th anniversary. And really thank you guys for coming out and participating in this roundtable. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Very much. We appreciate it.